Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about a NAS that I have referenced on the channel quite a few times, but this is the very first time we've seen it here in the studio. This is the Synology DVA1622. It is their surveillance optimized 2-bay NAS. Now, and a number of you who have been assessing different Synology solutions and, sort of like the idea of Surveillance Station 9, because frankly it's one of the best surveillance platforms out there, have been looking at the Synology portfolio, looking at something a bit modest for your surveillance needs, and then while going through some of the smaller systems saw, their surveillance category. What do you mean 600 nicker? That's right, this 2-bay is $600. And when you look at the rest of the 2-bays in Synology's portfolio, all of which, by the way, arrive with surveillance station support to a greater or lesser degree, they start at about 150 and they end up at about 400 nicker. Why exactly is the DVA1622 600 nicker to start with, and why isn't it called DS? What's its DVA lark about? Well, DVA stands for Deep Video Analysis. Now, what that ultimately means is AI-assisted surveillance recognition in one shape or form. And ultimately, it is when you are utilizing an AI or AI algorithms or an AI plugin or an AI software component to analyze recording and featured footage that are being delivered to the system, and therefore alerts, notifications, warnings, and ultimately actions are then based on AI-assisted processes, which then narrow down the results. We talked about it before in the channel when you have a surveillance camera knocking around in your home or business environment and there's a tree moving around, and all of a sudden you keep getting alerts on your phone going, for Christ's sake, I'm just going to cut down that tree, or probably easier, I'm going to nullify that alert, and therefore you leave yourself at risk. Where AI falls into that category, unlike things like PIR, is it has an algorithm built into it that understands the difference between different things. And this allows those alerts for if you want to know when a person is approaching your home or business, and if that person is known or unknown, this will allow it. If you've got a busy street outside of you and there's cars going back and forth, and you want to know when a specific vehicle arrives with a specific registration plate, something like this will help when every other, with the exception of one, Synology NAS will not be able to assist you in that. Now, there are other AI processes that are built into and are pretty much the reason for deep video analysis. These go from people counting to people recognition to areas, and ultimately a much more comprehensive means to monitor on the fly your surveillance feeds. Now, when I talked about this being 600 nicker, I do think it's worth touching on that there is another DVA, Deep Video Analysis, Synology NAS, the DVA3221. And that's $2,500. Suddenly, 600 don't seem that much now, do it? So, we'll crack onto that later on, but we're really going to be attacking that number in this video. $600, $2,500, and all the bits in between. Are you getting value for money? What are you actually getting for your money? And is this the ultimate compact surveillance solution for you? But before we go any further, let's unbox this bad boy. So it looks near enough identical to other Synology 2-bay NAS. To give her a bit of perspective there, this is a DS220. Yeah, pretty much identical. So you're not going to be getting a great deal much more inside this than you might expect from other NASs there. If we open it up, have a little look inside. We have our quick start installation guide. We have got information on Synology locations. Also, the system arrives with 3 years of manufacturer's warranty that can be expanded to 5 years with an extra fee there. In our accessory kit, we've got our UK mains lead. We've got a Cat5e cable, and we have our external PSU. It's a 60 watt external PSU there. That is about it. We've got screws, but they've already been utilised, and again, more on that later on. And we've got our bag with the device inside. Have a little look. And there it is. That is the DVA1622. Deceptively compact, isn't it? Just to put that into perspective, this is the other $400 fully featured 2-bay Synology NAS, the DS723. And genuinely, if I close my eyes and forgot which one's in each hand, I could probably end up reviewing the wrong NAS. Now, we're going to come back to that device later on, I believe. But for now, that is the DVA1622. Not a huge amount of kit, right? You would think for 600 NIC you'd be getting a little bit more, but really it's about what it's capable of more than the hardware on this device. But before we get to that, let's talk about the design of this device. Now, circling back to that figure of 600 NIC, one of the reasons that this is significantly lower, and one of the many reasons that it's significantly lower in price than the DVA1622, is because its architecture, inside and outside, is incredibly similar to existing Synology NASes, and it's not as unique as the DVA3221, and it's eking quite a lot out of the existing structure and hardware. It utilises the same 2-bay chassis that we've seen before, and if we remove those 2 bays, they are click and load Synology 2-bay trays. The inside is pretty much identical to that of the DS720, and those comparisons, by the way, will get even more direct later on. Inside we've got our little memory slot there where we can upgrade it. It arrives with max memory. Again, we'll talk about that in the internal hardware. Ventilation, you've got the Synology logo there on the side of ventilation. You've got the other Synology ventilation there. You've got ventilation there on the base, and a fan there on the rear where that fan has got its RPM either set to automatic, or you can manually increase it or decrease it as you see fit. But you know what this thing doesn't support? It doesn't support expansions. You can't utilize expansion devices inside this. So unlike that 2.5 grand box that can support 2 5-bay expansions, the JBOD DX517, that allows you to ultimately add another 10 bays of storage as your surveillance recordings and your archive get bigger and bigger. With this, the 2 bays is all you got. Now you can take advantage of USB storage via the front USB port, and there's another one on the rear. On top of that, you can take advantage of cloud storage, utilising Synology's own C2 cloud or supported third-party clouds out there to back them up there. You can even use edge recording in some cases, depending on the camera that you're going to utilise, to use some of those recordings to work in parallel with that, as well as utilising Synology's own C2 surveillance platform that allows you to have a lower loss threshold if your cameras are broken or someone tries to steal the NAS. Ultimately, you've got ways and means of utilising different storage methods, either in synchronization or running in conjunction with one another for different kinds of recordings there. But its lack of expandability as a 2-bay for 600 NIC, it's a bit annoying. Because 2 bays means you are going RAID 1. You would not utilise this in a RAID 0. You might use it with SSDs, but for the right performance, but given camera feeds the way they transmit data, or even at 4K at a particularly high bit rate, you're not going to see the benefits of SSDs in this system, even in the OS, really. Little bit of performance extra, but not really. But having 2 drives in a RAID 1 environment means that if you go by Synology's own supported compatibility lists, at the moment, 18 TB is your lot, which means that this device can only have up to 18 TB with 2 drives in a RAID 1 configuration there, because you're not going to go RAID 0 and risk losing those recordings. So that actually lowers the threshold quite a lot in terms of your overall archival storage. I mean, within the software you can do kind of recycle and overwrite the oldest recording, and you can lower the frame rate, you can lower the resolution, switch to a second stream, change all of your feature alerts and stuff like that. But it's still not a huge amount of storage, and that's one of the gaping areas between the 2.5 grand and the 600 NIC that this void is covering there between the two of them in terms of storage. But for now, what I think we should do is take a little look at the ports and connections, because this thing has something a little bit unique going for it. Now, ports and connectivity on this, as I mentioned, has something a little bit extra under its sleeve. It's got another USB port there on the base, but have you spotted it yet? That's right, an HDMI out. This device joins the league of about maybe 6 to 7 devices in the history of Synology, which I think is about 23 to 24 years, to actually have an HDMI and a visual output on this device, which for those of you that want to have a standalone localized surveillance solution may be incredibly invaluable to you. Now, Surveillance Station can be accessed remotely over the internet. It can be accessed locally over the local area network, utilizing a multitude of client applications for mobile devices, desktop devices, PC and Mac. You can also utilize a lot of browsers, and to a lesser or a greater degree, depending on support of things like HEVC and conversions and stuff. But having localized access to have a monitor, a keyboard and a mouse all connected to this device, so that although all the cameras are working over the local area network, you can ensure that access can be restricted to locally only, as well as a terminal, a physical terminal system to interact with it, will be very desirable, not just to the old schoolers out there, but there is genuinely a good need for that if you have network issues or your network is being, suspiciously damaged to start with. That localized access there, as good as it is, does come with one negative caveat that we've got to talk about, and that is, if you go KVM, keyboard, video, mouse, this has only got 2 USB ports. One for your keyboard, one for your mouse, and your HDMI out. That's it. You've lost all your expandability in terms of USB. You've lost the option to create a USB backup. You've lost the option to use those USB for a UPS. You've lost the option to use those USBs for a multitude of things. So the localized access on this, I'm surprised they weren't able to eke out a couple of USB 2s on this. Now, I know the hardware architecture that we'll talk about in a moment is comparatively meager to the $2.5 DVA1622, but still only having 2 USB ports on this means that if you did want to take advantage of the HDMI out on this device, it's a 4K HDMI 2.0 port there, it's a bit of a misstep in my opinion to not have those USB ports there. Another thing I'll touch on is there's one GBE port there, which is fine. Now, what do I mean by that? Cameras are not going to oversaturate a 1 gigabit Ethernet port, 109 megabytes per second. This has no 10 GBE upgradability, and you'd really have to attach a lot of cameras to maximize that. Indeed, this supports up to 16 cameras when it's set up for the first time. But all of those 16 cameras are going via the single 1 gigabit Ethernet port. This 1 gigabit Ethernet port is also going to be, communicating with the rest of the local area network. Now, hypothetically, what you're going to have is a bunch of cameras all connected to a nice big old PoE switch, which in turn is interfacing into this. Now, again, I'm not suggesting it would easily oversaturate a 1 gig connection. But what I'm saying is, with all of that recording going into this, 2.5G, maybe 10G, maybe dual 1 gigs, wouldn't have gone amiss, if you know what I mean. And that's particularly annoying when you look at the 400 or 350 to 400 quid DS723 that has both dual 1 GBE ports and an option to add a 10 gigabit Ethernet on there. Now, I know that is using a more beneficial CPU with more PCI lanes to play with, and therefore it can do more with it. But I'm just surprised, with an HDMI out there and only one GBE port there and a couple of USB 3s, that there wasn't a little bit left over where the system could have added, again, USB 2 ports or another network interface port there. Again, the odds of oversaturating 1 GBE, you'd really have to be pushing every camera to the very limits with constant recording through that switch, then all feeding into here. But still, nonetheless, unless you're utilizing edge recording, so the alerts are being handled by the cameras, I don't know, if you were using Synology's own cameras, then that would be a different story. But overall, in terms of the ports and connectivity on this, I don't think they're bad, they're just not blowing me away. And I like the fact that it's got localized access for HDMI and KVM, particularly when you see that the DVA3221 4-bay $2.5 system has a graphics card inside that has an HDMI out that Synology have covered so you can't use it, and this, which is doing it all with a Celeron processor, by the way, still has an HDMI out, means I'm still prepared to give it good credit for those ports and connections. But for now, let's talk about the internal hardware, and then after that we're going to do a big old section on the software. Now, as I just touched on there, the internal CPU in this is a Celeron. It's the Intel Celeron J4125. It's a quad-core, 4-thread, 2.0 GHz processor that can be burst up to 2.7 when it's needed. It also has integrated graphics, I believe, that start at 350 MHz and peak at 750 MHz when needed, and it supports DDR4 memory. So, it's alright. What I mean by that is, that CPU inside there, we've already started seeing that CPU inside Synology's middle tier, such as the DS423 Plus arrives with that same CPU there inside there. And that system, it ain't 600 Necker, it is less, and that's a 4-bay as well. So that CPU also combines with DDR4 memory. Now it's got 6 gig of DDR4 memory by default, and that's your maximum. You can't exceed it. 2 gig is soldered to the board, and 4 gig is delivered via that slot that's inside. It's not ECC memory, and that 6 gig of memory in conjunction with a quad-core Celeron processor there is it. If we look at the base, we haven't got any M2 NVMe slots. The internal hardware, that is it. All of the DVA tasks that this is going to be running, be they people counting, be they vehicle counting, be they a combination of the two, so that's inclusive license plate detection or not, whether you're going to be using intrusion detection of objects or otherwise with lines and counting, and of course with facial recognition and managing the database and people and vehicle counting to start with, all of that can be done inside here. But that internal hardware comes at a cost. That cost isn't the money, although 600 Nika may annoy some of you when you think in terms of DVA, as we've already talked about. $2,500 is actually reasonable for the software output. It means that you can only run up to a maximum 2 DVA tasks. Now, it's kind of a game of chess, which one of those you can run synchronicity, because some of them are combined tasks with a system that is a little bit more efficient about the internal hardware. Because it lacks an internal graphics card inside there to bolster that CPU and memory combination inside there, it means that not only can it support up to 16 cameras, but only 2 of those AI or DVA enabled processes can be run at any given time. Now there are ways around it. You can, for example, schedule different tasks at different times of day. So you may have that during the day you want people recognition because you're not at home and you want to know who's coming up to your door. Likewise with vehicles and license plate recognition and classification as well. But during the night you may be a little more liberal. You may change things. So there are ways and means to have those 2 tasks but have different tasks running at the same time but at different times of the day. So you can sort of get around it. But there's no avoiding that the 2 tasks that this can do at any given time, that are DVA or deep video analysis by the AI at any given time, pale in comparison to the 12 DVA tasks, depending on the ones you select, that are available and can be done at any given time on that 2.5 gram box. So the point I'm making is the internal hardware on this, within that price point, I think it fits neatly. But its DVA abilities aren't just less than a 2.5 gram box, they are substantially less. And although both this and the DVA3221 both arrive with 8 camera licenses, which by the way is another one of the big reasons why that price tag is actually pretty reasonable in the Synology ecosystem. It's still no denying that only supporting up to 16 cameras on that hardware and only running 2 DVA processes at once may be quite limiting to a lot of users. And because there's no middle ground between the 600 quid option and the 2.5 grand option, it means you're either going to have to go for this and be very selective and creative with your schedules, or you're about to spend a lot of money. Now, going back to those camera licenses, I do think, although that's more to do with the software section, I do want to talk about it before we dig deep into Surveillance Station. Now, why? Because most other Synology NASs, and by the way, when I mean most, I mean 98-99% of every Synology NAS that's ever been released, has 2 camera licenses. Now, those camera licenses allow you, I hate seagulls, to have 2 cameras from a multitude of different brands. And again, we will be testing on this video and others, Reolink cameras and Synology's own cameras. That does allow you to have 2 cameras in Surveillance Station on any Synology NAS running with all of your recordings. Now, you won't get DVA processes without a DVA NAS. You can use Synology's cameras to have certain AI-assisted processes with recognition, not to the same level of DVA, or you can use things like Armcrest cameras or Amcrest, that actually there are ways and means to use their onboard hardware to have some of those AI processes. Again, nothing like that, but still 2 camera licenses to get up to 6 camera licenses means per license you have to spend somewhere between 30 and 50 quid depending where you are in the world per license. So remember, 8 camera licenses, and they are lifetime as well. They're not subscription, you don't lose them after a year, you're not paying monthly. My man alive, those seagulls are going nuts. They really don't like surveillance. But those surveillance camera licenses, those extra 6 camera licenses, really do make a difference there. And do remember that if you do go for those Synology cameras, the Synology cameras don't use up a license. Whether you want to call it that they include a license or they're license free, whatever suits you, if you go for this device and then you go for Synology cameras, you're not using up the 8 that are there. So you could fill up those 8 camera licenses with your Reolinks, your Anks, your Arm Crest, your friggin' hit vision, whatever you want to use, and then add more Synology cameras, or just use Synology cameras to start with. But then you are losing some of that value of the 8 camera licenses that are included inside this, which may feel slightly contrary. But we've danced around it. We've got to talk about the Synology software. We're going to talk about Surveillance Station, the DVA appliances that this does, and just how good they are. I hate seagulls so much today. Let's make our way over to Surveillance Station and put this thing through its paces. And here we are on the desktop of Surveillance Station on the DVA1622. And if we open it up there, as you can see, there we are running on that quad-core Celeron. There is our system. And we have a whole bunch of cameras up and running here. We've got Synology cameras. We've got Reolink cameras. We've even got a little mobile camera down here that I'll be talking about later on in the video. Neat little feature there. But very early, I'm going to immediately highlight this to you. At the moment, I am recording this in OBS, as you can see here. And unfortunately, there is a lot going on here. At the moment, we're accessing it via the web browser. Later on, we'll be using the client application to access the camera. And consequently, we are going to be hitting those resources hard. So I apologize in advance if the frame rate you're seeing drops. For me, it's pretty smooth. The only camera at the moment that's not running too smooth is the mobile one down here. That might be a bandwidth oversaturation given the proximity Wi-Fi wise from that camera. But overall, I'd say the user interface is just as good as ever in Surveillance Station. Another thing I will highlight, an early question and a lot of users have, although you are definitely going to be buying this device, you can tell me still moving my arms even though I'm not looking at the camera, even though pretty much everyone is going to buy this NAS for Surveillance Station, and I will touch on this later on even more, you can use all of DSM. Look at the IP there, 112 there at the top. You have access to the gamut of Surveillance Station applications, which is fantastic, which means, to my mind, this is probably the best 2-bay Synology have ever released. Yes, it's utilising a slightly older CPU, but the idea that not only have you got 8 camera licenses on this 600 Nika box, when the DS720 and DS723 Plus, arguably the latter having 10G upgradability, knock around for about the 4 to 450 mark. That's 150 to 200 Nika for a Celeron integrated graphics powered NAS, which for Plex Media Server, for VMs, for the whole range of Synology's collaboration suite you can utilise there. But on top of that, you've got those 8 camera licenses and HDMI out for a local display. That's right, that KVM that we talked about earlier. So again, a lot of users wondered that, and yes, you have got full access to DSM, although via the HDMI out, you will only see Surveillance Station. So another thing I want to touch on is, although you'll see me accessing this via the web browser, this is not the ideal way to do it. So I wanted to include the browser interface here just because the browser interface is still pretty darn good, and there's only a handful of things you can't do in the web browser that you need the client for. But if you do want the client, just head into the App Center, and then from there, there's the full range of applications and services you can install. The ability I have at the moment to have this camera feed down here is utilizing an add-on known as LiveCam from Synology. Again, available for different platforms, and it allows you to turn your phone into another camera. There's also a bunch of other apps too. But for now, let's come out of the web browser and make our way into Synology's own application there. We're going into the full Surveillance Station client there. And again, we're accessing this on the local area network for this review. I will say, there's very few things about this I'm not happy about. I will leave it to the end, and my main gripes will become very, very clear throughout the course of the video. But they're very, very infrequent. There's only 1 or 2 problems I have. Now, the user interface, as you can see, is very clear, and everything is pretty much where you expect it to be. So, for example, much like Synology DSM, the main options there to select are there at the top left. If you want to add a camera, you'd go to IP camera. If you want to monitor your cameras, you go to monitor center. If you want to look at your recordings, you look at recordings. You want to look at your maps, so on and so forth. Everything is very intuitive and also very snappy and responsive. Now, again, when we are seeing things opening up here, do bear in mind while we're doing that, again, that we are utilizing quite a lot of my system resources there, so we do have to factor that in. Now, you might see here on screen 12 different images, but it's worth highlighting that there isn't actually 12 cameras here. What I've done, if we really were to break it down into the camera area, is I've got, at the moment, technically 5 cameras in operation, including that mobile phone there. But what it allows you to do within the monitoring center is to create areas of monitoring and set them into their own bubbles. And that continues further if you want to go for an old recording. So take, for example, let's go for this one here, on Viv 1. This is utilizing a Reolink camera. We will be doing a separate video for Synology's own cameras. If we open that out into a new bubble there, what we can do while it opens it up into a new bubble, we want to see if that cat was there earlier today, but we don't want to lose sight of this cat, obviously. So what we can do is here at the bottom, we can now go into the past. So if we choose to, we can go to earlier that morning, and then from there, it synchronizes all the cameras together. But what if we don't want to synchronize all the cameras together? What if we only want to check that one camera? Remove the sync option, select the camera you want to go back in time with. We'll go into that area of effect where the chair is, down there. If we want to, we can go back into the past just on this one camera if we choose to, and look at earlier that night. And if we want, we can then go in and find out, was that cat still on the chair at that time in the morning? And it looks like he was. He is a cat that is not doing enough these days, to be honest. You, sir, need to do more. But if we want, we can open that out into a larger field area there. We can remove it and go back to those other main cameras. And again, we can look at old recordings while simultaneously looking at the new recordings if we choose on any of these. If we want, we can go ahead and change that layout into any layout of our choosing depending on the range of cameras. Obviously, the more cameras you have, it will change the view. So if we want, we've got that main map view now in the middle and all of our individual ones around the edges. And again, any camera we can hop into at any time and assess a lot of what's going on there. So if we right click a camera here, we can change if they do have alerts there for any of the AI supported stuff there. More on that later on. We can bookmark that camera if we choose, download local recordings, edit the camera settings, something we'll show you later on, take individual snapshots and change the output quality of this if we're seeing that the frame rate drop has been, kind of ruining the experience for us if we're running a multi-camera feed there. And again, we can choose if we wish to open out into its own individual view. As you can see there, we're seeing a slight frame rate drop there. We're not going to blame that too much on that camera. So coming out there, and we can look at the overall feed. We can start dragging extra things in. So whether we want to utilize maps, such as using Opal Maps or Google Maps there at the top, or we can upload an image of our own house overview there, something we can do, and then assign cameras to it very, very easily. And all the time, if we choose to, and synchronize all of those cameras together, what we can do is maybe go back into time. So if we go into 4:30 in the morning here, very early here in the UK, but it is the summer, we can see it flicking between all of those feeds into everything changing. So that cushion's not there, and we can flick between that in real time and either have all the cameras doing it or just one or two if we choose to. And there's some old recorded footage there. But again, let's go back to live on all of the feeds. And indeed, say if we want to create a brand new layout, but we don't want to get rid of this one, well, we can go at the top here and create ourselves a new layout. So if we choose to there, we can do a general layout there, save the previous one, and this new layout, we can pick and choose as we wish. We can either use a pre-existing layout that will dump in a bunch of camera feeds if we choose into the 4s, or if we want, let's go for a 6 camera feed here. So what we'll do is first thing first, we'll introduce our map. So we'll go for the house map there. So now we've got the outside, then we'll add our outside camera there. At the same time, we'll go for a couple of the indoor cameras here. We'll have those stationed there. We'll add our Google camera there, and we'll add our other Synology camera there. It's that straightforward to create our camera layout. Now, say we want to zoom in on this car here on the top right. Well, we just click tap and zoom, and boom, we can zoom in very easily to zoom into that car. But if we want to keep the original camera there on screen, we can just pull it into a new window, and the feed will be adaptive all the time. Now, say we want to use some of the existing AI supported stuff that we've created earlier on, well, we can drag and drop those immediately in. So depending if we have them activated, because that will be the big one here. And again, this is something I will touch on later on, but when it comes to the AI supported stuff on here, you are going to feel the limitations of only being able to run 2 AI services very early doors. Because as you can see, while I'm pulling all of these out here, you may have already noticed that some of them are not showing on the feed. Now, the reason they're not showing on the feed is I can only run those 2 AI services on this rather modest hardware. I've saved them and I've created a whole routine for those deep video analysis operations, because I can only record 2 of them at any given time, or in the case of facial recognition, that ultimately overpowers most of them. The result is that you may be creating individual AI supported services that you can't run all the time. Now, again, you can counter this with that scheduling. So for example, while we've got this counting one here and we edit that one and go in, what we can do is set a schedule for that one. So at certain times of day, this task kicks in. But right now, if we try to add a brand new task, as you can see, it won't allow us to do so due to that modest hardware. And it's for the users that are going to take advantage of a lot more of the AI services, that is when the GPU in the DVA1622 kind of proves itself. But if we have a little look back at that feed, we can go back to the cameras. We will get on to the AI supported services later on. But moving out of that, we can go back to our previous layout. And our previous layout that had all of those feeds running there, we can then close that down. And we can have a little look at actually accessing and managing all of your individual cameras. As mentioned, I've got 3 different kinds of camera here. I've got Synology's own camera, and I've got my mobile camera using DS Cam on my phone. Now, again, there's not a vast amount you can edit on that because it's all managed from within the app. We have done a video on the live camera application from Synology. But just to give you a sense of perspective, and again, this isn't a review of Synology's cameras, because as I mentioned in today's review, the Synology cameras in many ways kind of invalidate the whole free licensing thing that you get with this device, because Synology cameras don't have the license, and therefore that recouping money in the value of the DVA, if you're not going to be overly reliant on the AI services, may be a bit lost. But just to put it into perspective, here is Synology's camera here, and we've already got a lot of those analytical supported services already built into the camera, so they're being managed on the camera, not the system, which can be utilized as a means to circumnavigate those 2 AI process services. But bear in mind that all of them are possible on the camera that are possible on the DVA. Whereas if we look at the OnViv camera here, this is a Reolink RRC 33A, I believe that one there. If we go in and have a look at those supported services, there's much fewer there. Now, again, depending on the cameras you use, if you're using like an Arm Crest, some of those AI services can be utilized on Synology's platform. But when it comes to utilizing the full range of AI services, you're probably going to have to go for one of Synology's camera there. But let's use Synology's camera just to talk you through some of the available options open to you there. So, for example, you've got the usual setup options there, how you want it to be connected. Do you want it encrypted? Do you want it to have kind of very narrow fields of access? Then when it comes to the recording quality, as you can see, you've got a support of both compression formats there, but bear in mind, you're going to, be the effective supported license on your client device may be a factor. Again, if you're using Synology appliances, that shouldn't be a problem. Then you've got adjusting the camera image itself and privacy masking. So again, any point you can say, I don't want anything here to be monitored. So you can go ahead and apply a privacy mask to a given area if you choose, and then that will never be recorded, that area on the feed. And again, you can have it so it's permanently there and never used, so kind of immutable, or you can have it so it can be removed within the monitor center on the fly. So we're not going to apply that there. Then you've got the live view there, what you see when you're accessing the camera at all times and what it's recording with. So you can sort of counterbalance a lot of the bandwidth utilization there. Recording there, you can set up varying schedules. So at the moment you can see we've enabled motion detection there, and we will be making our way back into the monitor center shortly to show you the impact of that. But you've actually got quite a lot of things you can change. And again, we are looking at a Synology camera, so the options will change. And overall, the management of the camera is pretty extensive. And do bear in mind, I touched on this earlier on, that the bulk of the things we're doing right now can be done in the web browser as well as within the client application. There's a tremendous degree of flexibility there. And again, if you're using edge recording there, you're using a camera that's got an SD card slot inside, you can then utilize that to kind of have that secondary backup camera footage there. If the camera loses connectivity with the NAS, you can have it so it's recording to the SD card within the camera. Support and compatibility of this on third-party cameras is a bit spotty, I'd say, but on Synology cameras, unsurprisingly, they have integrated it immediately. We won't go into too much detail about the camera's own AI supported stuff because we're going to be doing this in its own review shortly, as well as talking about which AI services are supported on each. But as you can see, you can adapt all of these from within the camera settings and change a lot of those detections as well. But just bear in mind that it's the retention of data and having those records to refer to, such as facial recognition, license plate recognition and more, where you're going to need a DVA because the camera doesn't have the retention on board. It has live recognition services built in, but it doesn't have the ability to consult existing records. And again, all of these things can be set and adapted very quickly via this interface there. And again, if you're using non-Synology cameras, some provide those features and options. Even when we look at those third-party cameras like the rear links that we've got here, there's still a lot of adaptive options open to us here. So for example, a lot of the individual recording streams, accessing things at a certain time of day, they're all there. Everything to do normally with, adding watermarks to camera feeds as well. A lot of these are supported on both their own cameras and third party. So for example, a privacy mask can be adapted just like you could see earlier on within the DVA settings. This is one that you can do within the camera settings there. So if we want to hide the cat in this view, we can do that. Now, again, the control of that privacy mask from within the monitoring center is obviously then removed because you're doing it within the camera feed, but it's still nice to have that. Now, you may have already noticed that I've already equipped in certain areas the watermark. I've already applied a watermark to this, which is done very easily. So we can just change it to the word test there, have it to medium size. We can choose, do we want it repeated? And then you can have that word there on test on screen. So we'll set it back to NAS compare, so at least there's a sense of consistency. And again, you can change the opacity, have it deeper, lighter, change the color palette, boom, done. And now all of the camera feeds will have that watermark as needed. It's all very straightforward and very easy to use, and again, accessible either by the client or via the web browser. All of these things can be adapted because you can still view the camera feeds within the browser window there. There's a lot to do, a lot to play with. You can even change a lot of the areas of effect that you can have a lot of the notifications coming through. Now, moving over to notifications coming out of the cameras, we can go back into that monitoring center there. And what I want you to look at is a couple of things now. Number one, on the right-hand side, you can look at the events log. Now, at the moment, we've not enabled any of those events, but all of our AI-supported services here are kicking in, be they person, be they motion, be they people counting. They're all here on a timeline. Now you can go in and open them all up in the recording settings there to see them in a much broader fashion, allow you to cycle through all of your alerts. But one of the things that I'm less keen on in this, and I will touch on this again later on, is I don't like that there isn't a kind of scheduled overview. Now that sounds a bit of a weird way to put it, but on the DVA, because of its more modest settings and that reliance of whether you're going to use DVA settings or you're going to be using facial recognition there, what I kind of would like to see is a timeline. And again, maybe it's there, I've dug and I weren't able to find it, but what I would like is the equivalent of this timeline at the bottom, but showing me that, say, between 8 AM and 12 noon, I have people counting in effect. And then if I've got a scheduled switch over to another task, I would like it if it was shown to me in a much more visual fashion. And at the moment, creating a schedule where these tasks overlap doesn't feel as intuitive as everything else in here. Now, again, that is something that's been necessitated by only supporting 2 AI services at once, or in the case of facial recognition, it utilizes both. But if I was going to run 2 of these tasks at any given time, but I want to flick between all the different options. So, for example, if we disable both of these, so we can go through some of these options, as nice as it is that I can create that schedule, so if we open a brand new task, we go for people and vehicle detection, call it test 2, select which camera we want to use. It would be nice to have that camera on the right hand side, because I'm only running this many cameras. If I was running 10 to 20 cameras, yes, I've got the name, but it would be nice to be able to see that feed here on the right hand side of the screen. But if we go ahead and we carry on with that Synology camera there, we then decide what do we want to detect. So do we want to detect people, or do we want to detect people in a certain way? So we want to know if a certain crowd of X number of people appears. If people are hanging around in a given area, we can do that, or just have generic. Now, on top of that, same goes with vehicles. Detect all vehicles, or detect vehicles that stop for a period of time, or that enter a certain area that you don't want them to enter into. You can enable all of those settings there to be a lot more concise and precise about how they're detected. You can even break it down to regional license plates as well for the license plate recognition there. So if we detect all vehicles, from there you can choose the license plate database if you've already created there. I've not clocked any yet, unfortunately, because of my location. And from there you can choose that bookmarks are automatically added to the existing range of alerts. Click OK. Then select the area that you want this to be effective into. So you can choose, for example, in there whether you want to utilize an inclusive exclusive node, so how you want it alerted into. And that's really it. We're running that whole camera feed. We're using different zones if we choose, if we've enabled different zones, and just click done. And there you go. We've now got that new people and vehicle detection in place. Now, say we want to use a different task, because we can still use two tasks if we're using the merged people and vehicle detection, which is quite efficient. We can go for intrusion detection. Intrusion detection. So we'll go for an intrusion detection alert. This time we'll use a different camera. So this time we're going to use that one there that's slightly an angle. Again, I kind of wish we could see that feed on the right hand side of the screen. We can choose whether we want to do people or vehicles. So we can choose, we're not going to worry too much about vehicle interception for this, but if you've got a line that you want to know if people cross it and you want to know if a car enters it, you can enter that option there. So we click next, and again choose whether you want it one way or two way. I would have liked to have seen this feed earlier on, but that's too much of a criticism really. So what we can do is move that around, bring that down there, and then we can, if we choose to, really just alter that. If we want, we can really set things up quite concise. Do bear in mind, the more kind of all over the place you go for there, the more difficult it might be for the line crossing to be recognized. So again, if we go for one way, then you can choose whether you want it going in or out. And there you go, we've now got our two tests, test 2 and int2. If we go back into the feed, what we can do, we'll find our new test that we've created, pop one there, pop another one over there, and our new feeds have now been added. But as you can see, people counting morning one that I did earlier today is now not visible. It's not shown. That's not the right one because we didn't do line detection. We did that one. But as you can see, the alerts and monitoring that I set up earlier on have now been deactivated there. And I just kind of wish there was a scheduled overview of time that allows me to see on a timeline fashion. And we can see that vehicle detection taking place now. If we open that up into its own feed window there, we don't want to zoom in. Sorry, let's remove that zoom feed, pop that back. Then that's me clicking like a madman. So we open that out. You'll see that detection as vehicles go by and people go by. And as you can see, it's already starting to work. And the right hand side of the screen, these will all begin to be added. The DVA analysis isn't perfect. As you can see, it's already noticed that that car is staying there in the spot. But sometimes I do find that the bubbles are kind of hopping around just a little bit. And I think, again, my placement of the camera is a big part of that. As you can see, it's been very difficult for me to find a spot for the camera in this local area network environment to get a decent enough view to really capitalize. And I think that if you had like a large corporate car park, you probably have much better results than me. Let's remove that. We don't want to go full screen, do we? We want to make our way back in and pop that back into the feed there as all of our alerts continue. Now, how about if we want to actually look at the results that these are generating? Because all of these tasks, even when they're not active, as you can see, these have all been disabled to favor those two there. You can still access their results. And you can do this in two separate ways. You can go directly into the recording area, something we'll go into in more detail later on, which filters down a lot of the alerts that you've encountered, not only here in terms of people and vehicles and more, But on top of that, you can sort of break them down into people or vehicles individually. But again, more on that later on. But if you go into detection results here, from here we can find out a lot more of the information of things that we've seen and kind of break them down. So again, we can choose if we wish to download that file, add a watermark, you know, not just having it on the live feed, but also download it in terms of a timeline and files, and you'll get the higher quality as well. Choose whether you've acknowledged this, make sure it's immutable in many ways. If we go for this people and vehicle detection here, for example, we'll play it in the web browser. The colors at the bottom denote things that have been triggered while this is running on. Again, apologies for the drop in frame rate. We are still utilizing OBS and our system resources are getting pretty hammered. But if we move forward into the recording, we'll be able to see all of those alerts happening as they're triggered by the machine. We've got the person that's walked into the field of view there. But again, it's very tough to have this running and all of the other recordings, so we're going to have to be a little bit fair with this. But don't worry, on your system, if you're not going to be recording with OBS, you'll be absolutely fine there. But again, all of these are filtered down, and you can go into the filter date ranges there, task range, and more. And the archival settings, if you want some of these to be stored away or how you want them to be retained. So do you want them to be overwritten after a certain period of time or just archived? You can all set those up quite easily. Now, we've got some of the recordings here that happened during the night with the vehicle passes. So I set up a camera feed at the bottom of my road to alert me if vehicles were pulling in or that vehicles were stopping. And that can pass all the way down into the night mode as well, and the cameras will flick in between. And as you can see, it was a vehicle counting mechanism as well, as I wanted to count the vehicles as they went through. So now I've gone ahead and disabled those other two AI supported tasks and switched over some counting tasks here. So we go back into the feed. Unsurprisingly, some of these camera feeds here are now no longer appropriate. So we can go ahead and move some of our counting tasks now into the available window, and we'll be able to see the counting task taking place where there is a count feed on the right hand side of the screen. So if we open that out into its own level, you'll be able to see that as people go in and out of the property, they will be alerted into that counting area. Setting up an AI supported counting task is surprisingly easy. So if we go into the video analysis, what I'll do is I'll delete this task here. We'll keep the detection results, but we will delete it. And we'll go ahead and create a brand new counting task there. So people counting, we're doing it from a wall mounted camera. Click next. It's very straightforward. Call it count test. We utilize again that camera at the top. You can choose whether you wanted people going in and out of the area or one direction, but we'll do both directions for now so we can keep track. We go ahead and we then select our area of effect. So in my case, what I'm going to do is set it so that this is going in that direction. We need to go down that road. You set it up. You put these all nice and straightforward into where you want the area of effect to be. So as you can see, it's as simple as that. And again, you can change the direction if you want. You can change what you want it to count. And you can change a lot of the parameters on the fly based on where you are. And the system will run some different scenarios there. But as you can do a quick people detection test. But of course, because no one's going down there, we're not able to run that test. But it's that straightforward to set up people counting. And then from there, as always, you would then just go straight away into your feed, find the one that you've created, drag it in, and boom, we're still moving forward very, very quickly and easily. It's that straightforward to set those up. If we go back into the AI analysis, well, let's try a different one. So let's get rid of count test. We can disable that now. Click add, and we can look at some of the other options there. So vehicle counting, again, very straightforward. Very easy to set up there on the fly. Go ahead, say whether you want the vehicle registration as well. That's earlier on, but we can go entering the area, exiting the area. Go ahead. It gives us our feed. And again, what we can do is move in. We can zoom in if we choose, but I'm going to keep the whole feed in. Again, for me, this isn't going to be as accurate as it will be for anyone else, because unfortunately, your area of effect is going to be different to mine. But for me, if I wanted to know that someone paused outside this property, maybe I had a parking space there like that car there, I could choose to know if cars are coming through and then dig down a little bit more into the camera's own settings to enable that loitering detection there. So again, we're going to vehicle test, pull that into there, and again we can remove that count test from earlier that's no longer needed, open it up, and there we go. again, you can be very precise. I'm doing this very quickly on the fly. It's very, very easy to set up these AI supported tasks. It's just such a damn shame you can only do 2. Yes, you're getting this at a lower price, but still, nonetheless, go back to that 6 camera feed. There's no avoiding that. It's just a real shame that you can only run 2, and there isn't really a scheduled timeline view for you to move it around more intuitively. Now, as mentioned earlier, when it comes to facial recognition and keeping a database of people, if you try to create a new one or even enable an existing one, you're going to hit trouble if you're trying to utilize any other services. You are going to have to disable that there, disable any active tasks. Even if you try to only have one running, as you can see there, you need to be able to, you have to pretty much dedicate the whole system services to that in order to take advantage. It's nice and quick to flick between. If we enable that there, we can see now our facial recognition is active there with the live feed for us to look at. Yes, we can open it up. And if we go into the existing database, so for example, recognition results here, these are all the faces that have been recognized, along with people that are wondering why the camera's still up, of course, for these tests. And again, you can produce a report if you want. So let's generate a report there to see what it looks like. Actually, we should probably create a report that's a little bit more broader timeline there. So we'll have that running up until perhaps just the last 2 days. Go for that one there, and that produces that report that we can then open up locally if we choose, as it's downloading the report there in the background. Now, again, if we go to the database, I've already added these people as people started to appear there. And again, on the right hand side of the screen, let's get rid of that there, you can go ahead and start uploading people directly into a database if you choose to add existing people into your local area environment if you want. So you can upload your employees, your family members, so it already knows when those users come in, and you can create a new user very, very easily, pretty much from anywhere, or as new faces arrive, they will appear in the face database and recognition results, allowing you to either merge them with existing users or create brand new ones there. And again, you can put them into groups, as you can see, admin, on-site neighbor, and you can add people into groups very easily and adapt who they are and what groups they're in very, very easily and very quickly. Which brings us into when you're actually accessing your footage. And we're going to go into a few different ways, because I want to talk about recordings, I want to talk about smart search, and I want to talk about smart time lapse. Now, let's start with the obvious one. We want to talk about the recordings. Now, as you can see, because the DVA1622 has a lot of AI supported services on it, and even if you're using Synology's own cameras, some of these features will be available in terms of filtering. As you can see, it already moves all of the different kinds of alert into its own bracket. So whether you want to only analyze cars, you only want to analyze people recognition, you only want to recognize motion detection, all of those are broken in quite nicely. And again, all of them can be filtered on the right hand side of the screen. You can go for a list view, which is super dull, but at least it tells you where it comes from, how it was triggered, and more. So there's lots of ways then which you can utilize this information and receive more tailored alerts. And again, if you want to play any of these, it's a simple one-click system for you to just head straight in. So let's select that one there. And we can just go ahead and check these and see what exactly triggered the alert if we choose to. As you can see, whether it's motion detection, that's a slightly different story. But if we go into people and facial recognition, and we go for one of the ones here, so we go for this one here. Let's select this one, and we can see they've got the vehicle and person recognition. So at the same time, not only is it recognizing people, so I asked my wife to do a very strange gesture at the camera for me, at the same time we've got that recognition all built in, all being noticed there and be filtered into. And the fact that you can filter between them on the fly is very useful. And again, if you're utilizing normal kind of motion detection, they're all sort of broken down there into all the different kinds of alert. And if you want to cycle into it, you can dig in to all the different variants. If you want to go into some of your older archives that get stored after a period of time, you can go through all of those as well as exporting them. But it's still a lot, isn't it? We're still talking about a lot of recorded footage. And again, you can download it, have that localized version of it, boom, done. It's a lot of information. So what if you want to look at large amounts of time? What if you want to look at certain areas on the recorded footage rather than the whole thing and get the system to do the work for you? To look at large amounts of recorded time and then find out very tailored alerts, what you need to do is head into Smart Search. Now, Smart Search is pretty tailorable. So, for example, we're going to go for that overhead camera. We can see it's in night mode there. And what we're going to do is flick over to yesterday. On the days of recording here. We was recording for the whole day, or even move the camera at one point. We're going to flick over to that time during the day. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to know every time there was a motion detection, which may seem a lot, but let's say we wanted to know every motion detection. And if we choose to, we can add a specific area, or we can analyze the whole area if we choose, and then just click go to a certain time of day and then click start. So every single motion detection can now be found, and we can set that to only be for a specific time of day as it cycles through that period, and then we can stop it, and then we know within that period that these were our motions. Now again, that's within a small captured window there that we cycled through, but moreover we can then set that to a missing object. So if we choose to, we can set it that an object was in play, which is then no longer there. So if we choose that option, we still have to drag it into the grid, of course, using the plus symbol there. Or we can go ahead into foreign objects that have been introduced into a given area. Is there any issue with regard to the camera? Or just generally lots of different settings that we can cycle for over time and utilize the Smart Search facility to search within that specific window to find these events that have occurred, and then from there we can choose to view them individually within their own recording window without shutting down Smart Search and figure out and find out what the movement was or any of the other parameters that we've selected. And then of course we can choose to download those local reports if we choose to, nice and easily in the background. But what if you have hours, days, weeks, months, or even years of footage that you want to break down into blocks but view very quickly indeed? Well, for that you need that Smart Time Lapse application. So from there, as you can see, I've already set up a couple of tasks, but if we would set up a brand new one, we can call this one Lapse Test. I apologise for being so close to the microphone. Select which camera. Again, I wish there was a feed showing me the camera there. We can do this as a one-time or regular recurrent thing, and you can also choose what recording quality you want this to be. So we go ahead and create that one there. We then say how truncated we want the time frame. So as you can see, every 6 minutes of the time lapse is approximately 24 hours in those settings, but we can change that to another variable. And again, you can enable compression and stuff like that, as well as how you want it recorded. Do you want it regularly scheduled and therefore overwriting an older recorded schedule? And it's as straightforward as that. Now, luckily I've already made a bunch of recordings. So for example, this is 1.6 days of footage that has been compressed into 6 minutes. And this was when I was setting the Synology up for the cameras the first time. And we can skip in between this and overnight. There was when I was setting the camera up outside for the first time. And again, it's fast forwarding through well over a day of footage and has comprised it into just 6 minutes of recording there. And the same goes if we want to look at, say, this overnight recording here, where we wanted to see what was going on as quickly as possible as the transition between night and day, and the camera flicks between day and nighttime mode. All of that could be smart lapsed incredibly quickly to allow you to view. If you don't know quite what the alert you're looking for is, and you just want to look at hours, days, weeks of footage in mere seconds or minutes, you can utilize this to break through those old recordings, and it will process either new recordings as they happen, or it will process the old recordings as well. So you have two options open to you there, whether you want to go for something more specific and target certain areas for certain variables. So you've got two options there. You can either utilize Smart Search to look at specific areas of effect and different kinds of alert in older recordings, or if you need something a little bit more general but you want to look at larger expanses of time as quickly as possible, then you can utilize the Smart Time Lapse feature. Overall, Surveillance Station 9 still continues to pretty much be the gold standard of NVRs, in my opinion. It's not perfect. I don't like sometimes that the intuitive nature kind of hits a wall when there's a lack of available feed and it becomes overly reliant on just the camera names. I think they could stand to even do just a static shot from a camera to allow you to know sometimes when a camera which camera you're utilizing. I don't like that there isn't an overview scheduled view in a timeline mode that allows me to better create an overarching kind of image of which AI tasks I'm running, because I've only got 2 to play with. And even if I had 12 tasks running on the DVA3221, some of those are still pretty beefy. And if I've got 10 to 20 cameras, a better scheduled overview would be pretty tight and pretty good. But there's no denying that Surveillance Station 9 has pretty much got it all, notwithstanding that the cameras that you utilize have all got lifetime licenses and 8 camera licenses included with this box. But I haven't even talked on the added applications in the App Center there that allow you to do even more. Streaming directly to YouTube, checking the integrity of individual recordings. Basically, lots of applications that are of an enterprise level quality, not just utilizing cameras either, that allow you to make the most of your surveillance setup, all of which can be installed very easily, along with those desktop applications and mobile applications too. Then there's C2 surveillance. If you choose to, you can go ahead and enable dual recording patterns so that your recordings are not only being stored on the NAS and of course on the SD cards. Don't forget, you've still got edge recording as well, as we talked about earlier, but also stored on the camera with 3 different versions of or 3 different types of account you can have with C2 surveillance. The C2 surveillance recording, again, as we see there, it is going to cost you extra. There isn't kind of a free option for just one camera. They do have a trial that you can run. But as you can see, whether you go for the basic one, where it's just the alerts really, and the kind of notifications, or you can go for a much heftier one there. And again, you've seen the prices there per year per camera, and it breaks down quite well on Synology's own page there. Then you've got things like customizable notifications and alerts and how you want the system to react and let you know when things happen, be they from cameras being tampered with to individual motion alerts, AI or otherwise. And then if you want to go for the truly seamless kind of non-invasive setup, go for home mode, something I talked about in previous videos before. A fantastic feature that allows you to synchronize your mobile device with the NAS on the local area network, so you can have it that when you walk into your home and your phone connects to your local Wi-Fi, you can have it so either the camera switch on or off of a preset schedule of what the cameras are doing. But when you walk away from the house and your device breaks with the Wi-Fi connection, the cameras will then switch to whatever profile automatically where all the cameras are recording or motion detection or more, all built in. Ultimately, Surveillance Station 9 still continues to be absolutely incredible. And whether you're going to use it for business with things like C2 surveillance, utilizing maps and utilizing individual blueprints of your layout, or you're going to use it casually for your own home user stuff, just use the light feed, a handful of licenses and home mode, Surveillance Station 9 and it running on the DVA1622 is borderline unparalleled. It's just such a shame that those hardware resources somewhat limit the utilization of that AI stuff, and there isn't really a smooth way to create that schedule that allows you to run multiple services at different times throughout the day. But let's make our way back into the studio and summarize today's review. So, what do I think? Well, I think it won't come as a surprise that I really like it. I've always been a fan of Surveillance Station, and when I have talked about Surveillance Station in the past, with or without this device involved, I've always claimed it is the best software out there. And the fact that this arrives with 8 camera licenses, for me, even beyond the DVA stuff, sort of puts it in a good price point, notwithstanding that those camera licenses are perpetual. They are lifetime, which is already bloody good stuff, given you not have to go down the renewal road. But on top of that, even if you were never going to use the DVA appliances inside this, and even if those camera licenses were only 30 nicker a pop, which they're not by the way, that means those 6 camera licenses already make up close to 200 nicker at the price tag of that 600 quid price tag. And the 400 quid that's left for you to spend on this puts it in the same price point as the majority of prosumer 2-bays from Synology out there. And then when you roll in the DVA stuff there, the people counting, the vehicle counting, the facial recognition, the license plate recognition, the intrusion detection, and all of that running with Surveillance Station 9, there's a lot to like here. However, we have to at least acknowledge that there are certain streamlines of that hardware, be it that CPU without overly reliant on integrated graphics, and the kind of weird choices of some of those ports and connections that make utilising it standalone oddly limiting in other ways, the lack of expandability, the fact that I can only run 2 tasks, DVA tasks at any given time, unless I get super creative with my schedules to have different ones running at different times. There is a whiff of compromise, there's no denying it. But that whiff of compromise is to stop you having to spend £2,500. And if you were never going to fully utilise the DVA3221, but the idea of deep video analysis appeals to you, this may be a particularly good choice of NAS. I also do think it's worth touching on the slight mixed messaging of Synology releasing the DVA1622 and releasing their own range of cameras, because in some ways these invalidate some of this, and these being license free means that if I use them with this, some of that saving of those extra licenses is sort of not being recouped if I'd gone for another third-party camera brand. But then I would lose a lot of the edge AI stuff that those new cameras provide, something we will talk about a lot more in their own dedicated videos on the BC500 and the TC500 there. But ultimately, if you are looking at a Synology NAS and you weren't looking at it as an all-purpose, I want it for backups, I want it for Plex, I want it for VMs, I want it for surveillance, but you were really focusing on that surveillance, I can't recommend this enough. Because although, yes, you really do have to max it out because of that Celeron and 60 gig of memory, if you are looking to get that 16 camera set up for you, I think this is the best surveillance desktop for most mid-range, prosumer, and even early SMBs who aren't looking at £2,500 for the baseline system without storage or cameras. And I do think it is a great NAS. I just think it is a NAS that you have to accept when you purchase has been scaled down intentionally. But overall, if you're interested in Synology Surveillance Station, it's a great NAS, and NVR's go near unbeatable. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. The full written review of this device will be in the description, along with links to buy it from a multitude of different stores. If you use those links, result in a kickback to me and Eddie here at the blog and the YouTube, and it allows us to keep doing what we do, and it allows you to passively support content creators like us. But if you're still on the fence about what you need for your surveillance needs, and you're definitely on board with going to Synology Surveillance Station, but you're not sure whether to go for their cameras or their own DVA system, we've got a video coming up on that very, very soon. And we've got links to other guides that you can check out on that too. Also, if you need some free advice for your setup, use the free advice section over in NAS Compares, the big blue button on the right-hand side of the screen. Or use our free community forum, Ask NAS Compares, also linked in the description, or contact us on the Discord. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.